So I started going through some of my stuff, recent stuff, mostly from the island, and it started arraying itself in a new way. And a lot of my reports, I find as I write,
please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments.
I have the same sort of problem. As a biologist and working with other biologists, I always try to err on the conservative side. If we can attribute any kind of sign to bears or something rather than Sasquatch, I tend to do that. And we may be missing things that way. So it's nice to see someone taking a stand and saying, this may not be just bear. I appreciate someone willing to step up and say that. I just want to check focus here. Okay. So anyway, Vancouver Island and islands in general. Now a little bit about the trail monitoring thing. Last year when I was here, we had 4 of these units with the company I worked with, and we were setting up on trails to record smaller mammals, fur bearers in the area, mink, marten, otter, that sort of thing. And I borrowed that equipment. Basically how it works, there's an infrared beam goes across the trail to a receiving unit. Anything interrupting that beam gets photographed by a camera on a tree. And this is the commercial unit, which was somewhat expensive, that works very well. But these are not too good as slides. They were a little better as prints. Anyway, this is me going through a flash testing, or going through accidentally. It happens all the time. Here, there's a deer just disappearing, which shows that I didn't have it set up quite right, or the deer was going a lot faster than I was. Here's the deer just coming in. This is the sort of thing we were getting. This is a blank, and that happened quite a bit with this stuff. Some atmospheric things will set it off sometimes. Okay, this very high-tech looking piece of equipment is something I built. I actually have progressed beyond this now, but this was like my basic unit. An automotive starter solenoid to drive the camera, an old Instamatic camera, because they're nice because they sit there with their flash cubes and don't draw any current, so but you're limited 4 flashes. But I got some fair stuff with that. And I guess what I went to, I have some of those infrared beams from some security stuff, but what I've gone to is a pressure pad switch in the trail, which is basically this unit here. 2 pieces of aluminum separated by foam with tapping screws through that when something steps on it, contact is made, a circuit closes, the solenoid is activated, it trips the camera. And it starts with an aluminum sandwich. It gets wrapped in tape to sort of waterproof it, covered with black tape to make it less conspicuous. And then I make an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these 10 inches apart to lay on the trail, something like that. The bear paw snowshoe is an attempt to simulate Sasquatch, but to demonstrate the purpose here. And my thinking being that most Sasquatch feet are longer than 10 inches, and I think we get about 48 inches here. Hopefully in a stride, we would get something like this. The other hope is that deer would cooperate by stepping between them as much as possible, so we don't fill up the film with deer. Anyway, what we are in fact getting a lot is deer. Anyway, nice photograph of deer. I'm quite pleased. This was one of the early ones, and this was very encouraging. And now this one you will not be impressed with, but I have to tell you that amongst the dots on the lens, 2 little dots there are the eyes of a black bear, which on the print you can see, and on the copy here you can't at all. And it's a dilemma because a black bear at night on a dark background with a weak flash is a real difficult thing to photograph. And so I'm thinking, if a Sasquatch comes through, I hope it's a white one or a gray one or a black one. I just no further ahead than we were. So 2 cameras simply to get the both flashes working together to double the flash. I've gone to very fast film, and I'm caught up in a lot of technical, and I'm pushing through a lot of technical stuff now with the film, trying to get things to work. But anyway, that's where we are. And I've also advanced the equipment a bit. I've gone to a very small solenoid, which allows me to use a smaller battery and more modern camera, which is working quite well so far. That's just a prototype there. Oh, just to comment on BioLine here. I'm quite pleased with this because this is another milestone in, well, for me personally, it's sort of the coming out of the closet sort of thing on this thing. I once spoke to the Fish and Wildlife branch. Now I've actually written 4 biologists in our publication, and that's kind of interesting. And what I used in the article is one of John Green's photograph, the bear photograph, which doesn't show well here, or sorry, bear track photograph, plaster cast, and I think I have a very conservative sort of approach. Now the other thing I wanted to mention, at the end of last year's talk, someone said, you know, for all that talking, I don't know if I've heard one new report. And I thought, gee, you want to hear, I feel like that fellow in Twitter, you want to hear reports? I have reports, or stories, doing the stories anyway. So I started going through some of my stuff, recent stuff, mostly from the island. And it started arraying itself in a new way. And a lot of my reports, I find as I write them out after an interview, part of it is the biology, the ecology, what we learn about Sasquatch, but it's almost always overshadowed by the response of the person. And these responses are quite interesting because they vary from what I call total acceptance, when someone knows about Sasquatch and says, you know, well, how about that, a Sasquatch? And now, that almost never happens. It happened with a native fellow I talked to who'd seen one, and he had the cultural background, he knew they existed. And certainly, my wife and I felt this way when we found these tracks. Right on, Sasquatch tracks, our first ones, you know. They're still our first ones, but anyway. And then there's kind of another end, there's honest disbelief. What the heck is that? And this is what you get sometimes with young people, they just don't know what it is. They haven't, some young people I've talked to haven't heard about Sasquatch. As I always say, they don't know what it is that's not supposed to exist. You know, they really don't know what it is. And then this area over here is pretty interesting because that's where most of the people I talk to seem to end up. What I call a double take, and I think I've got this on the next slide here. Yeah, with the double take, immediate recovery, delayed recovery, and then right into total denial or prolonged self-deception, whatever we want to call it. But this immediate recovery, and this was the fellow who called from Fort Hardy, he thought he saw a Sasquatch leaning against the tree with his peripheral vision. He turned his head. He thinks it's his son, so he looks over and it's his son. And he's turning back. He looks again, and that's when he realized that's not my son, that's a Sasquatch. And that was interesting because after it strode off, and he has this great description, then his son calls from where he's actually supposed to be, because his first thing is, what's my son doing over there? That was kind of an interesting one. This delayed recovery, 5 minutes to a day, there's 2 stories there. And I think I told this one last year where the fellow and his wife and the 5-year-old child stopped on a logging road bridge, looked down, saw a Sasquatch bending down, picking up a white plastic garbage bag, actually a picnic area. I looked up at them and went back to digging and rooting around in his bag. And they sat there, they looked at it, and they drove off. About 5 minutes down the road, he slams on the brake. The man turned to him and said, "What was that?" And the kid in the back seat said, "That was Bigfoot." And he said, "Yeah, that was Bigfoot." And anyway, then how these stories go. He looks at the gas gauge. They're almost out of gas. If they go all the way back there, they might not make it to town. So they go to town. And anyway, that was an interesting one. And the thing about one day, this was a friend of mine. And he's kicking himself now because he and an older guy, about my age, and a teenager were dragging a deer from the Lone Mountain, Comox Lake near us, about 20 miles into the mountains from us. And they're dragging the deer down, rainy day. Anyway, it's just Sasquatch leaning against a tree. And they go through the thing. Oh, must be Bob coming up to join us. "Hey, Bob!" Bob doesn't answer. And he says, "Oh, it's somebody else hunting in our area." So anyway, and they're looking at it. He's got torn reindeer. They're looking at this. Well, I better get this deer out of here. So Anyway, I think they go back, they're going to go back for the deer or something, or anyway, it's gone when they actually go by the very place. And then that night, they go to their cabin, and the teenager starts making a drawing. And it's just the typical, wonderful Sasquatch drawing. Big, prominent shoulders, long hair, short neck, or very thick in here, and the shaggy hair, and a pelvis way up here. And then they said, that's what we saw today, wasn't it? And then, depending on and then they called John Green, who called me, which was nice. We all went up there, saw the site, and that was pretty interesting because I realized, that's often how it happens. This prolonged self-deception, this is pretty interesting because this thing, guy here said, I saw a naked man, what did you see? Two guys had a sighting, and one guy told me about it, and we've talked about it a while, and I said, and he told me about his partner, he said, I don't think he wants to talk to you, and he didn't for a long time. And now, 5 years later, I'm getting to know this partner, and we're going to get together soon, and he's still working on it. But the first guy said, what Russell told me, he said, I saw a naked man, what did you see? And so Russell had seen a naked man where another fellow saw a Sasquatch, but the other fellow is coming around and thinks, maybe it wasn't a naked man. It was October, it was in the mountains, it wasn't really bare skin, he was covered with fur, but it's kind of a denial thing. It's how we make it into something else. And the one about I must have been hallucinating, that just happened about a month ago. The sighting came to me months ago. I was in an area where I had some cameras set out, and I have a friend who was helping me with his boat, and he always introduces me as the great Sasquatch hunter, and I always want to crawl under a rock or something when he says that. But people do say strange things like, oh, really? Well, isn't that interesting? And sometimes you get a sighting. Anyway, and this fellow said, well, the only one I saw was the one I saw when I was hallucinating. we let that go. I said, what did you see when you were hallucinating? And he goes on, and he gets the description. You remember Fred Bradshaw's description of the other year where he had this incredibly huge one, presumably a male? Well, this guy, they've been up in the mountain, it was on a logging road. They're driving along the logging road fast in a Toyota station wagon, an old one. Anyway, he's talking to the fellow on the other side. The guy in the back seat says, watch out. This guy looks forward. Here's this Sasquatch apparently, the Sasquatch-like figure on the road ahead of him. He bends down so he can see the top. He said the legs were like garbage cans. He said it was just a huge thing. I thought I knew we were going to hit it. So I swerved the car. He rolled the car, landed on its top. He's telling everyone, don't get out, it will roll down the mountainside. And anyway, eventually they get recovered. But he said, but that's the end of the story. He doesn't talk about it anymore. But I mean, and then here am I saying, no, your friend in the back seat who said, watch out, was he hallucinating too? About that, Here am I convincing this guy, gee, maybe you weren't hallucinating, maybe you actually saw him. Anyway, we don't know, but his details were quite good. And we're standing, he said, the waist was up here. Well, what that, and that was halfway up. And we're doing these figures, and it sounds like, 10 or 12 footer, and big. And he figured he should have hit it, because he said, we were so close, and I can only guess that it jumped quickly out of the way. So that's kind of an interesting one. We'll never know for sure what happened there. And this is interesting. Until now, I always thought it was there. This is an older man with his wife, northern Manitoba, many years ago, driving along a clearing beside a road in the forest. And the wife says, oh, look, Lauren, there's the bear. He said, yeah. It doesn't even look. And she said, gee, it walked all the way across the clearing on its hind legs. So, yeah, well, they do that, and where do they go? Well, then in recent years, we've gotten together, and here's another fellow who's kicking himself, because she's convinced, it was the Sasquatch, everything fitted, she the image and that, but he didn't. So, anyway, so those are them. I think that's the end of my presentation. So, anyway, thank you very much. Interested in a break. I've got one of my devices up here. I was distressed the other day. I'm making now a plastic box, and I took this in to show the fellow what kind of plastic I wanted. Sure. And and he said, "What are you, the Unabomber?"
questions?
Do any of your cameras disappear?
Sorry?
Any of your cameras ever disappear?
Not yet, but see, I'm limited in where I can place them, because I don't want them where there's hunters or hikers. I mean, I know how I would respond if a flash went off in my face when I think I'm in the wilderness. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a problem that way. I only had 3 out over the winter, and no, they weren't touched at all. And they kept working. That was the encouraging thing. Although I only got 1 deer. Well, not because I chose the wrong trail. I was rush setting them up. We only got 1 deer. Bears had been hibernating already in this area. Earlier this year, I had some ideas. But they do go for, I'm getting those electric wheelchair batteries, the big 12-volt gel cells that aren't good enough to run wheelchairs anymore, but still drive my solenoid. And it went for almost 4 months, so that's nice to know that they will keep working. Sorry.
John, the sensors you set up on both sides of the trail, is there a limit?
Yeah, they say 30 feet, but I'm having a lot of problems with them because if they even go slightly out of adjustment, it pulls down in your solenoid, stays on, burns it out. So it's simple technology seems to be a lot better for pressure pads. But you're limited here. I made some longer ones of these, like I think 5 feet for wider trails, so that's okay. Oh, sorry.
Now, I had obviously been talking to somebody different about the buffalo hunt, and they say that the natives never put it on the totem because they put totem, so they're family and their family tree, as opposed to the tourist type that they put in Victoria and Vancouver parks. But now you've given me completely different insight into a tribe that actually uses these, and even has shown a picture on a bear.
Yeah. Well, this is unicorn. I'm not far enough into know. I mean, there was a difference between unicorn and plus, I guess.
This is unicorn?
This is unicorn, definitely.
Where are they located?
Well, there's a book I actually just got before coming here at the UBC library, and he talks about an axis, and unicorn, it's coastal, BC coast. A night inlet is one area where they are, and just, I don't know about it, but basically BC coast. But so is Bukwas, and like my one friend Tom Seaward, he says, well, Junakwa is the female, wild woman of the woods, and Bukwas is the male, wild man of the woods. And he said, you know, it varies from family to family what we believe. So either things are getting lost, or there's just variation in what we believe. These two seem to fit in, and of course, there's different names throughout North America. I'm sure there's people here who know a lot more than I do.
One other thing then, on Trinidad, did you learn any stories of being interested in there that were actually true?
No, I haven't.
There's a book called Faces of the World by Edward Malin that discusses the Sasquatch and the Bukwas. You'll find in my bibliography. Any more questions?
What's the cost difference on those 2 different setups that you've got there per unit?
Oh, well, that's the whole thing.
Versus Stride's work goes crushing.
Yeah, well, like my unit, I've been trying to keep it under $100, and it's creeping over as I get it better, especially with the better cameras. And the sensors, I think I'm paying $60 at Radio Shack for them, and the pressure pad I can now build for about $12 or $15, so it's quite a bit less. Yeah. And of course, the sensor, there's a continual draw. It's only 40 milliamps continuous or something, but nevertheless, it is continuous, and so there's a limit. Where this thing, it sits there basically dead. And what I've done for the camera, I found a camera that once it charges its flash, basically shuts down and doesn't draw. And then I've replaced the little AA cells in here with the large D cells and got 4 of them hooked up here, so that seems to keep the camera going. That's not a problem. So that's good. Of course, I have this open so it's on. Yeah.
And how often do you check those?
Well, that's been a problem. I had these units out on an island. Got a ride out before Christmas in terrible weather, and then didn't get a ride out till some more terrible weather just before coming here, because I'm kind of like, gee, if we got anything, wouldn't it be great to go? Well, it wasn't nothing. But anyway, and I had decided they quit ages ago. It was a wet winter and everything, but they kept working for 3 months. But with the infrared beam, it would have to be, I think I could get it to go maybe for about 2 weeks with a big battery fully charged. Yeah.
John, have you tried any about using like mini solar panels, like rigged up?
Yeah, again, it's a cost thing. They're there. I think there's one that you can put on the dash of your car. It's around $30, and that would keep topping it up. And that would be a good way to go.
And what about the possibility of rigging up like a sky pager device to it, so that when it was triggered, it could let you know that something is triggering the camera, so you can get up there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, except that all these areas have deer and bears.
Right.
And I'm expecting. I'll be happy if I get some nice bear
Well,
footage.
This is my next question. Have you ever thought about, instead of the one beam, if you had two beams, set one about 6 feet?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But I keep listening to heights, and I'm thinking, about 6.5 feet should do it,
Yeah.
Listening to hunters, mind you, it's pretty
Or
awful.
it might be Paul Freeman in a costume, so you have to remember that.
Yeah, well, anyway, yeah.
So a big round, any more questions? Round of applause for Dr.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.